that are spoken in the Arabic continuum. And there are basically, like, Arabic has been spoken by Jewish, Muslims, and Christians for about 1,300 years. And when people initially talked about these different varieties, they were very happy to just use the terms Jewish Arabic, Christian Arabic, and so on. But in the last decades, we've seen a lot of sort of interference of political interest and agendas on confessional varieties. So people are not very happy to now talk about, for example, Jewish Arabic or Christian Arabic. When I was a student here and I started talking, in normal seminars, I usually had 1 or 2 people in every seminar of a certain school in Cambridge who would then challenge me. Why would you say Jewish Arabic? Why would you posit such a thing as Jewish Arabic? And of course, this makes you think about your terminology. And basically, this follows sociolinguistic theory. So in sociolinguistic, any social group is prone or has a tendency to develop speech forms that are very specific to that group. And that is because particular speech forms reinforce identity within that group and also mark sort of boundaries towards outsiders. It's a very normal thing. For example, young people tend to have their own language, youth speak. All sorts of social groups have their own terminology, and so also have religious groups. And there is another aspect. It's not only about spoken language, it's also about written language. And Jews and Christians often use different alphabets when they were writing Arabic. So Christians would use Syriac alphabet or Greek alphabet, depending on their profession, and Jews would write in Hebrew. That's because the first schooling in the medieval period was in the liturgical language. So people basically used the alphabets that they were used to. But the problem is, especially with Jewish Arabic, the descriptions of Jewish Arabic went much beyond that. So rather than talking about a Jewish sociolect, people started talking about a Jewish language. And from a linguistic point of view, this is really not tenable. You can't really posit a particular Jewish Arabic, even though people say, well, there are so many Hebrew words, there are words that people can't understand. Doesn't that mean it's a separate language? And people always say, well, in this case, a lot of young people would speak their own language, right? Because we don't understand what some young people say. So there's really no sort of point in sort of stressing Arabic, Judeo-Arabic, Jewish Arabic as a separate language, but people have done that. And I think a lot of the agenda that is behind that is that it's actually about an ethnic struggle within Israel. So we have the Ashkenazis having their own language, Yiddish, which is a language because it was taken out of its original speech environment and put into another speech environment, and there this independent language developed. But this never happened with Arabic. The Arabic speakers always stayed within the Arabic continuum. So when I use the term Judeo-Arabic, I only use it as a particular term for Arabic that's written in Hebrew characters, not for spoken language. When I talk about spoken Arabic, I can say Jewish Arabic, but I really avoid the term Judeo-Arabic because, again, it gives us a sort of flavor of a distinct language, which is really plainly wrong. So, what these confessional dialects, or these confessional sociolates, are still sort of very rich in information is the dynamics between, the linguistic dynamics between the periphery versus center of power. So normally, when we have languages, there's a great similarity between the written and the spoken language. And in Arabic, there's a difference. We have this very high standard literary written Arabic, and then we have the normal low variety, which is the spoken Arabic. And the differences are basically the high variety is a little bit like Latin, and the spoken varieties are maybe Spanish or Portuguese or French. So there's a big difference. And the high literary written variety is called Arabiya. And this is basically a set of very strict norms for Arabic, which go back to the religious literature. And Muslim writers, at least until about 40, 30 years ago, before the arrival of social media, were much more compelled to stick to this set of rules. Whereas Christian writers and Jewish writers didn't have this religious commandment of having to stick to the literary language. So whenever we look at writings by Jews and Christians, we actually discover a lot more vernacular forms, which is extremely important when you work on language history. You actually see how the language changes. And you don't see that in the written varieties because it's basically one set of sort of prescriptive standards that was basically maintained over the course of over 1,000 years. But in the Christian and Jewish writing, we see basically this variation, which makes the material very, very interesting. And I'm working on two big sets of sources. One is the Cairo-Geniza from Old Fustat. It's basically a big depository of manuscripts that was left behind, like in this little book behind this wall there. 300,000 leaves of various different pieces of writing. A lot of them are letters and documents, which for linguists are extremely important because you can only really work reliably linguistically on sources that were written by one person at a particular time. Otherwise, if you work with literary sources, I'm being that's along. When you work on literary sources, you sort of lose the authenticity of the source. And another source is what Mohammed will actually talk about a bit more later, are the price papers, which is also an equally interesting, intriguing early modern cache of letters. And we have a particular focus on merchants, because merchants have a particular sort of pragmatic literacy. They are very mobile, they have very leveled language forms because they're very geographically mobile and have particular social networks. And they're really linguistic trendsetters. So whenever you read mercantile correspondence, you really see forms centuries before they appear in other writing. So this is where my big focus of research is. And just like 3 little points, what sort of things we're talking about. For example, we will look how a person's individual style changes according to who they write. If a Christian writes to a Christian, often they use a lot of vernacular forms. If the same person writes to a Muslim, they will not use vernacular forms. So people are really aware of what's appropriate to write to whom. And we see this immediacy, this nice vernacular language in closed circles, but it being abandoned when people write to people outside their close-knit circles. And another thing that we work on is basically the inclusion of Hebrew. How much Hebrew is there actually in Jewish Arabic? And we see various different trends. We see some people completely shying away from using Hebrew, and other people including it very much, depending on whether they're merchants or whether they're communal dignitaries. And we also see a chronological tendency to actually start including Hebrew from the 12th, 13th century onwards, because that's the time of when segregation starts in the Middle East. We have this very pluralist empire in the 11th century. We see basically everyone talking in the same way. And then we see basically these forms creeping in as a result of increasing segregation between the communities. And what this looks like, just like some idea, this is sort of code switching that we work on. Basically, the black is Arabic and the Hebrew is written in red. So we also look at the interplay between the different languages. And I think I'll actually stop just in time for the 10 minutes.